Howdy, folks. What's going on? This is Outlaw Hatfield back at you one more time. It is good to be back for our Monday night. You hear me? Saturday
Yeah,
night wrestling chat.
yeah, you're
Oh,
in the
I'm getting
future.
ahead of myself. I'm getting ahead of myself. That's okay. It'll be fine. With me, of course, as always, is Mr. Rich White. How you doing, Rich?
Hey, how's it going? Not doing too bad. Not doing too bad.
Let's see who we got hanging around out there. We have Kingpin Rich White. Hey, you're out there too. Congratulations. Only person in the world who can be in two places at once. And the good lumpy grandpa, of course. Um, so tonight we're going to be discussing some a topic that you really don't hear a whole lot about in wrestling chats, much at all, really. We're going to be talking about some of the commentators. You know, these these are the guys that push the angles. Um, they're the ones that gives you the play by play. They're the ones that really call the matches and brings them to life. And guys like Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone, Gordon Soley, uh, the list goes on and on. Bobby Heenan. We can talk forever about any one of those guys. Rich, who were some of your favorites?
Kingpin throws out there Mean Gene. They spelled Gene wrong, but Mean Gene wasn't a play-by-play guy. He was just an interviewer. If we
Yep,
wanted to get into interviewers, that would be a totally different show altogether because there's so many of them too that you could talk all night about. And Mean
yep.
Gene would definitely be at the top of that list.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind about that. Um, yeah, Mean Gene has always been was always instrumental in getting the guys to do the interviews and this, that, and the other. But as far as the play by play, the commentary, the you know background stuff that you hear, it was always the guy sitting at the broadcast booth.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and
and
if you don't think that the broadcast the when you're watching it that the announcers don't play a part, go watch New Japan. You can watch the Japanese commentators and you can watch the English commentator team, right? If you are subscribed to their service, see which one you find to be more entertaining.
Vincent Ventura. Vincent Ventura was pretty good. This is from Alaskan Blisket. Or sorry, Alaska 556. There's too many Alaskas out here, damn it. But yeah, Vince could team up with a lot of people. Ventura was just one of them. He also
Yeah.
did pretty good with Bobby the Brain Heenan.
And Savage and Roddy Piper for a little bit as well.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
didn't he go with a while with Jim Cornette?
Vince, yeah, he may have.
I think he did. I'm not 100% sure, but I think for a while there, him and Cornette was a thing.
Yeah, because up until the Attitude Era, Vince was always the play-by-play guy.
Yep.
A lot of people didn't realize that he was actually the guy running things until the Attitude Era came about.
Yeah. He got scared when Nacho showed up. And if you notice, he sort of started backing out then. But when Nacho really started taking off for the NWO and this, that, and the other, he decided to get out from behind the mic and more into pushing the show the way he figured it needed to be to fight this Monday Night War,
And
which is
he became
essentially,
an actual on-screen personality at that
yep,
time. And when you
yep,
look at not just the play, not play, and then when you look at the same time period over in WCW, you had Eric Bischoff do the same thing with the
yep,
NW when he joined the NWO.
yep. I would say for a while, the two most hated men in pro wrestling was two guys who started off behind the scenes and doing the commentary, Vince McMahon and Eric Bischoff. Um, it's most people don't remember Eric as a commentator, but him and Tony Schiavone, and it started off with Mongo McMichael. Remember that?
Yeah, it was the Nitro announced team was Eric Bischoff, Mongo, and Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Yep. And it worked. It worked really well. Then they brought back Schiavone, and that's when it took off. I have always loved Tony Schiavone. I loved his style, the way he did things. He had this way of, it was almost like he could hold three conversations at once. He could call what was going on in the ring. He could talk to the guy next to him and interact with the fans on another level. And it was, it was just an amazing talent that he had.
And he's a good interviewer too.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you remember when they had a WCW Saturday Night on TBS, he was the guy that interviewed people, and he still does that now in AEW. He'll interview people in the ring.
Well, if you remember correctly, back when it's the 605 show, when the NWA was a thing, they were doing those shows at the Omni every Saturday, or whenever they did the taping. So it was Tony Schiavone and David Crockett.
No, they weren't doing them in the Omni. That wasn't until later. When they first started up, they were doing it at TBS Studios.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, that too.
Remember, they had the flags going around the studio.
Yep, they sure did. But yeah, they were doing those shows at the studios, and not only was Tony Schiavone doing the interviews, but he was doing the broadcasting from the podium that was right across from the ring. So, and God bless him, David Crockett was doing his very best, but he just couldn't keep up with Tony. Tony just blew him away every episode, every one of those shows.
Yeah. Kingpin asked, Jim Crockett is the guy that had the stroke, right? Stroke as in he had a stroke, or stroke as in he was the guy in charge, Kingpin? Because there's two different meanings in the world of professional wrestling.
Yeah.
Stroke could mean.
Yeah. It could mean two completely different things. Jim Crockett Promotions. That's the Jim Crockett we're talking about. His brother, David, was one of the commentaries, one of the announce teams. You very rarely seen Jim or any of the other Crockett's on camera other than David. That was the one you saw 95% of the time.
The only time you saw Jim Crockett Jr. is if they had a major announcement, like the I Quit match. If you remember, he's the one that announced that because basically he was thumbing his nose at the NWA according to storyline. Because according to the story, NWA refused to sanction the match. And he said, because we own this territory and this territory owns this championship, we're going to do it whether you like it or not, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, had a real stroke. I don't know. Did Jim Crockett Jr. have a stroke? I don't know.
I have no idea. Now,
Jim Ross didn't have a stroke. You're thinking of Jerry Lawler. Lawler had a heart attack in Raw the one night.
Yeah.
Right there. I think they were in Montreal that night. Jim Ross has Bell's palsy, which can cause different issues.
Now, do you remember who they replaced Dave Crockett with?
That would have been Jim Ross, wouldn't it?
It would have been Jim Ross. And to me, and if I was going to put my money on one of the greatest commentary teams of all time, Tony Schiavone and JR, they worked seamlessly together. Now, you didn't have the back and forth that you had with like a Jim Ross and a Bobby Heenan, or a Jim Ross and Jim Cornette, or Vince McMahon, or anybody else. You didn't really have that heel commentator thing going on. But as far as the play-by-play and this, that, and the other, They could keep up with each other almost perfectly. Now,
Now he's asking, how did you like Dusty Rhodes ringside? Okay, Dusty is a legend no matter what what aspect of the wrestling world you want to look at. He was a legend as a booker. You look at some of the classic NWA matches towards the end of the 80s, it was either Dusty or Ric Flair that was doing the booking for that match. On the mic, who doesn't have the Hard Times promo at or near the top of their list of all-time promos? Dusty could do commentary. You know, he was the total. I know Luger had the nickname, but Dusty truly was the total package when it came to professional wrestling. He had the charisma, the crowd eating out of his hand, you know, all that. So, yeah, Dusty's just a legend no matter what job he was doing at the time. And when you look at NXT, and NXT, if it wasn't for Dusty Rhodes, would not be where it is now. Everybody that's big in NXT or has been big coming out of NXT has Dusty Rhodes to thank for that. Literally. That's why when Dusty died, you saw everybody and their mother who worked in NXT crying their eyes out in that memorial episode because they all lost their wrestling father, if you will.
The thing about Dusty's commentary skill, though, was he would be getting into the match, but all of a sudden he'd just go off on a whole tirade about something else completely off script and then come back to it.
But that was Dusty.
Yeah, it was like, wow, okay, where did all that come from? Wow. You know,
look at some of his promos, man. That was just Dusty being Dusty.
I wined and dined with kings and queens. You know,
slept in alleys eating pork and beans.
Yep, exactly. That was one of my favorite Dusty interviews right there. I love that. Hard Times was good, but that's one of my favorites. And, you know, Dusty didn't get the credit as a commentator that he really deserved, I don't think. And a lot of the wrestlers who did commentary didn't. Look at Randy Savage. Randy Savage was good at it. Randy Savage was quite good at being behind the mic as commentator. Other ones, not so much. I mean, Taz was pretty good. Jerry Lawler, of course, he did it for years. He was great at it.
Yeah, the one flaw that Dusty had, though, he had that Sting syndrome, man. he was falling into that same trap Sting always did. Don't trust the heels.
Oh yeah, that was Dusty's downfall. But then again,
Dusty even fell for it with the NWO. Dusty was in the NWO. I don't know if you remember that or not.
No, yeah, I remember because he walked off from that. I remember it like it was yesterday. He was up at the announce booth doing the announcing and walked down to the ring and took the mic and cut a hell of a promo. You know, talking about old school wrestling, the way things used to be, and he wanted to see it get back to what it was. And then he pulled off his shirt and had that NWO t-shirt on underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they turned on him.
Yep.
Yep.
Just a couple weeks later. It wasn't even that long.
It didn't even take long.
Yeah, they turned on Dusty. Him and DiBiase. DiBiase was in the NWO at one point too.
Now, let me ask you, do you ever remember a commentator actually getting hit physically by a wrestler?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Especially when you get into the Attitude Era, Jerry Lawler was always getting smacked by somebody.
Yeah, but that was Jerry Lawler. That was almost to be expected.
Yeah, but Gene Okerlund, man. I know we weren't. He's not a commentator, but you know they got the boys in the back were always putting their hands on Okerlund. If you remember.
Well, yeah, he getting shaked and pushed and everything else. Midnight Range is in the house. Hey, Midnight, check your email. I sent you something. And we got to make it good because he is apparently listening tonight.
Yeah.
as
Kingpin
opposed to
says,
any other night when he's just sitting there making a nuisance of himself.
yeah. Kingpin says, okay, start the hate train. How about Paul Heyman? Paul Heyman is good at what he does.
You know, I have come to experience one thing with Paul Heyman. People either love him or they hate him.
Mm-hmm.
And they fall within one of two categories. It's either a Paul Heyman category or the Jim Cornette category. I
Well,
always feel a
I
little
wouldn't put
closer to
Paul
the Jim
Heyman in the
Cornette.
same category as Cornette, though. See,
No.
the Heyman hate is more of a love to hate because of the character. You know? Cornette is just an asshole. There's no other way of putting it with him.
Hey, I like Corny. I've always liked Jim Cornette. And if I could get that man on this show, I would talk to him for 6 hours.
There's some things that Cornette has said that I would just love to punch him in the mouth sometimes. And it's not in character. This is out of character, him saying something that
well, yeah, he has certain beliefs that stroke me a little crazy, but I still love the dude. I honestly love Jim Cornette. And you know why I like Jim Cornette so much, and it's really simple. Look at what he suffered for this business. The dude ain't a wrestler. He never was a wrestler. He was never in shape enough to be a wrestler.
no, but
and yet he's taking.
Some of the bumps that Cornette took. How many people in wrestling can you say have been thrown off of a 20-foot high scaffold?
Yeah, exactly. And
Cornette's one of them.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to respect him for that. I mean, he literally bled for the business. And when I say bled for the business, I mean he had to literally have his knees surgically repaired.
Yeah, it's something. Unlike some guys in the 80s that we've already talked about who had broken legs in quotation marks, when you saw Jim Cornette hobbling around on crutches and a cast on his leg after that scaffold match, that's because he legitimately broke his leg.
Yeah. He landed all wrong. But as far as his announce skills, I thought Jim Cornette was just freaking awesome. Love him or
which is more famous, Jim Cornette or the tennis racket?
Okay, we can go down this route. It depends on what he's doing with the tennis racket. If he's just holding it and swinging it and doing commentary, probably Jimmy. If you're talking about him managing a team, probably the racket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that loaded tennis racket.
Because I don't think there is any team out there that the Midnight Express ever had a feud with where Jim didn't get to wallop somebody with that racket at some point during the match.
And the best ones were always when it backfired and somebody got a hold of a racket and hit Cornette with it.
Yep. You remember Gordon Solie? Gordon Solie was another one of those absolute great commentary. Mm-hmm. His voice just lent to, grabbing your attention. He's one of the ones that no matter what show he was on, he just seemed to make it better. And he worked with just about everybody at one point in time or another. Mm-hmm. He worked in WCW. He worked in the NWA. He worked in different territories, Mid-South.
Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Yep.
Mid-Atlantic.
There's just so many. Lord have mercy. Michael Cole, we can talk about him. I mean, he did some pretty decent work in the WWF there for a long time. Lance Russell was another one. Who
Michael Cole anymore is like listening to fingernails on a chalkboard when you're watching SmackDown, but it's not his fault. It's not like the old days. They got a earpiece in their ear and they have to say whatever they're being told to say. And it gets you could tell when he's saying something he doesn't want to say. And then they have him saying the same thing every time a certain wrestler comes out. Like Sasha Banks, for example. Anytime she comes out, it's boss time, even though she really doesn't even have that character anymore.
You also got guys like I said, Lance Russell. He was Memphis territory. He was the guy that was doing all the interviews with, those guys, Jerry Lawler and the Master of Pain, which, by the way, was The Undertaker before he was The Undertaker and before he was Mean Mark in WCW later on.
Mean Mark Callis. That was his WCW name.
Yep, Bob Caudle. Remember him?
Yeah.
Kelly. Joey Styles from ECW.
Yeah, Joey Styles and Paul. Somebody said Bob out there, and I said Bob. Paul Heyman on the announce team for ECW.
Yep,
the original ECW.
So, tank flavor. What? Midnight Range is being a jackass as per usual. What flavor of vape juice are you using?
Yeah, then that was his answer to that question.
Oh, no. Thank you, Midnight. And hello, Joe.
The late great Gorilla Monsoon.
Yep. Well, if you're going to talk announce teams, especially WWF, you have to talk about Gorilla Monsoon. Monday nights on USA, it was Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Yep. Prime time.
Yep. And this was before Raw, by the way. This was before the Monday night show became Raw.
Yeah.
This was.
It was them doing a studio show, and then they would introduce different matches from different house shows around the country.
Yep. And Bobby would always come out in this lavish tuxedos. Remember that?
Uh-huh. Well, that was Heenan's trademark for a while there.
Yeah, he was.
In the 80s, it was the tracksuit, and as you got into the from the late 80s into the 90s, it was the tuxedos.
Yeah, I'll never forget the black and white one, the sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Oh yeah, the black and gold ones.
Yep, that was just his thing. And listening to Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan go back and forth was just it was comic art. It really was. It was hilarious.
They were the Abbott and Costello of professional wrestling. They really were.
Yeah.
Gorilla was the straight man, and Heenan was the comic.
And the thing about it was, though, if you remember Gorilla from his wrestling days, he was the heel.
Yeah,
he was always the heel.
He was the big badass heel who would just beat people down.
And all of a sudden, we have, one of the biggest heels in the business doing commentary and doing it very well, I might add. Now who was doing the commentary for the Saturday Night Main Event shows? I can't remember.
That was Vince and Ventura.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know they had done other things together because I'd watch them on the Sunday shows. So, was he a real gorilla? That seems a bit unfair.
He was the size of a real gorilla.
Yeah, he was huge.
You ever see Gorilla Monsoon in his heyday? That guy, there's one word to describe him. Big.
Yeah. He was what, 6'7", 6'8", maybe taller?
Yeah.
There was matches.
As tall as Andre the Giant, but he was bigger than Andre the Giant at that time.
Yeah, he weighed more at the time than Andre did. So you're talking about a guy that was. Andre and him had some pretty decent matches too.
Mm-hmm. And what about the time when Gorilla beat the crap out of Muhammad Ali?
Well, which time was that?
Take your pick. Or when Antonio Inoki beat the crap out of Muhammad Ali.
Well, how many times did Ali try to fight a wrestler? No, and here's the thing. Ali knew the score. He knew what wrestling was.
Mm-hmm.
So he just sort of played along with
it.
Yeah.
Well, they parried it in Rocky 2, or was that Rocky 3?
Yeah.
You remember the beginning with Hulk Hogan and Thunder, versus
Thunder Lips.
Thunder Lips, yeah.
Uh-huh.
They made it where Thunder Lips was really pissed off at Rocky, and then at the after they have their little match and they get backstage and they're joking around about it, basically totally pulling the wool off of professional wrestling at that time, which nobody at that time was doing.
Yeah. No, people were getting punched for that sort of thing back then. Or worse. But so I'm gonna lay it down right here. We're gonna do a top 5 right here. This wasn't planned. This is top 5. What are your top 5 commentators of all time? Worst to favorite.
Worst to favorite.
Or I know you're gonna like them all, but if you had to give 5.
5.
Or better yet, you're running a pay-per-view with all the classic guys there. You've got your Ric Flairs, your Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA, Tully's there, Road Warriors, Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, Bam Bam Bigelow, all the big guys from way back when.
Who am I putting on the announce booth?
Give me a 5-man commentary team.
5-man commentary team. Jim Ross, Tony Schiavone, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Jesse Ventura, Eric Bischoff.
That's pretty good. Mad Sexy, what's going on, Bubba? I ain't seen you in a minute. All is absolutely wonderful. That was pretty good. Okay, I'm going to go with Jim Ross, Gordon Solie, Bobby Heenan, just because you can't leave Bobby out.
Well, if I was going to put Gordon, you said announcing, Gordon Solie would have been the 6th guy. He would have been the interviewer.
Yeah, well. Tony Schiavone, of course. Did I already say him? I don't know if I did or didn't, but it would be Tony Schiavone. And I would go with Randy Savage. I would go with Randy Savage as that 5th guy.
That's not a bad one either.
No.
Savage is an underrated person when it came to his mic skills on the commentator desk. When it comes to his promo skills, there's no question Savage was one of the all-time greats on the microphone. But his commentator skills, because a lot of people don't even remember him being a commentator, are highly underrated.
No, he didn't do it a lot.
No, he didn't. But when he did, he was good at it.
Yeah, he was very good at it. And right now we have Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone doing what they were doing 30 years ago over on AEW. I think that is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Have you caught any of their shows? I know you said you were going to try to. I don't know if you did.
I've been working, so when I get home, I try to catch what I can. But I always get distracted by something to show up. Road Warriors versus Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express versus Freebirds, and I get distracted and I remember this. I want to watch this match. Like I told Jerry, Ricky Steamboat versus Ric Flair. I watched 4 or 5 of those matches earlier. So
yeah, this
I get wrapped up in the whole nostalgia of the older matches before I even start looking at the newer stuff.
Yeah. This past Wednesday, they brought back on AEW. They brought back one of the classic match gimmicks.
Hold on a minute. There's something I got to take care of real quick. Joe Brown. See that guy, Midnight Range TM? You want to have that discussion with him because he's the idiot that come up with that. You have to remember that Midnight was dropped on his head a few thousand times when he was little. That's why he keeps a mohawk. Hair won't grow on the other two sides of his head. It's weird. But you and he can have that discussion at a later date. Good Lord.
Okay. Anyway, this past Wednesday on the Jericho anniversary episode of AEW Dynamite, they brought back one of the classic gimmick matches of all time.
Oh?
You may remember one that took place in '83 at Starrcade between Roddy Piper and Greg the Hammer Valentine.
Refresh my memory.
Dog collar match.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They had Valentine in the stands for it. It was Cody Rhodes versus Brody Lee for the TNT title in a rematch.
See, now there's been an argument started in the chat out there. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate you.
Yeah. I got a feeling Joe is somebody we know who's just.
I know Joe. I know exactly who Joe is, and Joe knows I know who Joe is. So, but that's okay. Joe just needs to be careful.
Yeah, Kingpin says he likes the bunkhouse and barbed wire match. They don't do any barbed wire matches anymore because they got to be too dangerous. You'll see barbed wire in like a no holds barred or hardcore match, but you will not see the ring wrapped in it anymore.
The last barbed wire match I remember seeing, instead of having the ropes being barbed, and the original barbed wire matches, they took off the ropes and they actually ran barbed wire as the ropes around the ring.
Mm-hmm.
That was an old barbed wire match.
And yeah, that's how Mick Foley lost half an ear.
Now, what you see with a barbed wire match is they'll take coils of barbed wire and just run it around the ropes, all the way around the ring.
Mm-hmm.
Big difference. It's probably a bit safer to do it like that. But the old school barbed wire matches was completely different.
Yeah. Yep. Kingpin now asks a different question. Which cage match was better, WWE's or NWA's? They were different. Particularly if you're talking late 80s WWE cage match. Because at that point, they wanted to make it look like that Andre the Giant and King Kong Bundy were so huge and bulky and whatnot that you couldn't contain them within a standard steel cage match. So they came up with what was basically steel bars, basically rebar that was welded together to form the cage, which gave it the steel cage match a whole nother level of intensity to it, just because of the fact that instead of being chain link fence, it was an actual cage. You know what I mean? And when WWE started the rule where the way to win was to climb out, it made it easier because it was like climbing a ladder, which is why I tripped over my words and called it a ladder at first, because I was getting ahead of myself. But,
I remember the first time I seen that particular cage was the Hulk Hogan Zeus match. Remember that?
Yeah, I don't think that was the first time. I think, wasn't it Bundy versus Hogan that cage was made for?
It may be.
WrestleMania. I think that's where that cage came from, was that match, Hogan versus King Kong Bundy.
But
which I think was a year before the Hogan Zeus.
if you're asking me who had the better cage matches, I would say NWA, WCW had the better cage matches.
Well, they had the single better cage match.
Oh no, they had the greatest cage match of all time. Period. There's never been one equal it. But as far as anything else goes, I think that the WWF was playing catch up with WCW. WCW had the War Games match, and at the time, that was probably one of the most brutal wrestling matches out there. But it was that first one was absolutely amazing.
15 after here.
But there was one match that pretty much started all those super matches like that. You wouldn't had the War Games match. You would never had the Hell in a Cell match. You would have never had the Elimination Chamber without this one first match happening in what 1985.
Yeah, I think it was 85.
So I'm not going to tell you what that match was. That's for another show at another date and another time.
And the thing is, remember too that the cage match predated that match.
Oh yeah, there was cage matches before, but not like
the most brutal cage match.
There was other cage matches, but nothing of that caliber.
Yeah.
In fact, it was also, as far as I know, the first type of match of that sort.
Yeah, first one I can remember.
Yeah. And the next one I remember took place 5 or 6 years later. So.
Yeah, I remember some of the wrestling magazines at that time period were censoring, by blurring the photos because of how bloody the match was.
Yep, it was like some of the things you would see coming out of Japan today.
Oh, no, you don't see that coming out of Japan anymore. Japan doesn't do the death matches like that anymore.
I'm telling you. Back in the day, they did, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was in Japan that Mick Foley lost part of an ear.
Yep.
That was in one of their matches over there. I mean, the Japanese, they were crazy.
Apparently, Joe hates wrestling, and he's wondering how he got here. Well, Joe, you don't have to hang around. You know where the door's at. Feel free to leave at any time. We've gotten completely off track here somehow or another.
Yeah, but that's
what were we discussing? No, not for us. Not for us. It's normal. But so who would you say are if you had to pick a single broadcast team to do every show from here on out, who would it be? 2 men, 2 guys, 2 people. Hard question, huh?
It is. Actually, it is.
Yeah.
Well, one of them's going to be Tony Schiavone, especially since he's still on the top of his game today. He's more on top of his game right now than what JR is.
Mm-hmm.
Second guy. I honestly don't know who I would pick to be the killer guy, because you could pick so many and just throw them in at random. Like, and WWF did that quite frequently, where the killer guy for a while wasn't a set guy; it was just whoever was available.
Yep.
And they do that in Japan. They do that in Japan. New Japan does that, where they'll, depending on what day of the week it is, you might have Rocky Romero on color commentary, or Don Callis, or Chris Charlton, or somebody like that on their color commentary with Kevin Kelly over there doing the English broadcasts. So it's yeah, I don't know. As far as the color commentator, I'm going to put to be determined. We'll have Tony Schiavone and to be determined.
Yeah, I can go with that. I would have to agree with Tony Schiavone. Now, if Bobby Heenan was still alive, I would have to pick Bobby as that second, because he was just so awesome at that. And you could make him just work with anybody, and he could. He was just that amazing.
Yeah, Jesse Ventura was the same way. Jesse Ventura worked with Vince McMahon, with Gorilla Monsoon, and with Tony Schiavone in WCW, if you don't remember.
Yep. But since, of course, we lost Bobby a few years back, I don't know. It would have to be somebody that could play off Tony. You know.
You know,
it's hard.
He's not officially a commentator right now. Jericho's really good at it.
And Jericho is good at it. Mike Tenay's name comes to mind, but I think he's more of an interviewer. I really don't know. And as sad as that is, who would that second person be? I got it. Bradshaw. I would love to have seen Bradshaw and Tony Schiavone work together. I think that would be a great combination.
I can see that.
Yeah. Dusty Rhodes was a great wrestler. That man had more skill than most wrestlers half his size. So, and he was, and like you said earlier, Dusty was just the total package. He had the mic skills, he had the charisma, he had a moveset, and you know, there are probably better performers than Dusty, but Dusty knew how to sell. He knew how to make it look like he's being killed when he's probably not really getting hurt at all.
There aren't very many guys that were Dusty's size back then
that could do what he could do.
Could find them, but back then they were Dusty's size. Back then they could go 60 minutes on a Broadway.
Yeah,
if you know what Broadway is? That's a 60-minute time limit.
That means 60 minutes from the time the bell rings to the time they leave the ring.
Yeah, 60 minutes from the time the bell rings to start the match, and then an hour after that they ring the bell to end the match.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing. Nowadays they got what they call an Iron Man match. That happens once every blue moon, and you've heard them say, "Well, you have to have two guys that has the cardio to do this sort of thing. It has to be two guys that can go that kind of a distance. It has to be two guys this big."
Yeah.
And the thing about it,
man, a couple weeks ago on NXT, they had a fatal 4-way Iron Man match for the NXT title.
Mm-hmm.
4 guys going 60 minutes.
And the thing is, back in the day, especially the early and mid 80s, they were going 60 minutes every night.
Yeah, main event was a 60-minute Broadway just about everywhere. And Matt Sexy's asking what an Iron Man match is. Okay, an Iron Man match is a match that has a set time limit, and you get as many pinfalls or submissions as you can. You get 1 point for each pinfall or submission you occur in the match. Whoever has the most points at the end of the match wins.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way it works. And now that's a big deal. Going an hour is a big deal right now. But like I said, back in the early 80s, mid 80s, going an hour, that was just a day at work. You went an hour every time you went out, especially if you were main event.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you
New Japan, you'll still get those matches. Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada, back when they were having their series of matches, each one of those was near 60 minutes long.
Yep.
Only one of them went the full 60 minutes, but they were all over 50.
Kind of like WrestleMania. Kind of. The way it used to work was the booker would tell the guys, okay, this is the finish. This is how this is going to work. And I'm going to give you this long to do it. So normally it would be 15, 20 minutes to a finish. And the booker would tell you exactly how that match was going to end. At the end of that match, if you went back, the next two guys come out and they did their thing. If you've seen a 30-minute match, that was a long match. But if you had a United States television, a United States title, or a world championship, or a tag team championship, you wasn't having a 15 or 30-minute match. You was going out there for an hour. You were going out there to pay some dues. And they're right about what they say. You have to have two guys that's got the cardio to do this, because they wasn't slow matches. Man, especially if you had a guy like Ric Flair in there who could just run 20 miles without taking a deep breath.
Yeah. The one Broadway match that I saw personally was in Three River Stadium. It was Memorial Day weekend back in, I want to say it was 85. Pouring down rain, low 50s. Ric Flair and Magnum TA went to a 60-minute Broadway match in the main event. I was freezing my butt off. And I was fully clothed. I don't even want to think what those two guys were feeling.
Well, after they got into it, probably not a whole lot. But, they can say all they want that wrestling's fake. And, it's fixed. We all know that. The gimmick's up. We've known for years how everybody does wrestling. It's just out there. I hate it, but it's out there. Back in that day and age, they would go out and they would put on a show and everybody believed that they were literally trying to kill each other. And they wouldn't take 5 and 6 minute breaks between moves. They'd get out there and they would get it on from bell to bell. Ric Flair would roll up, would do a little bit, get mad, roll out the ring, pace around a little bit, jump back in the ring, and they'd go at it again.
Yeah, the only time they got a break during that match is if somebody put somebody in a headlock. They were known as rest holds because that's basically what you were doing. You were taking a breather while you had somebody in that hold, and then you were talking back and forth while you were in that hold. Nobody else could hear you about what you were going to do after the guy got out of that headlock or pinlock or whatever other rest hold you had him in.
And see, that's the biggest difference between wrestling today and wrestling, man. The only thing that was told to a wrestler back then when they went out was, this is how you're going to win the match. That was it. Okay. You're either going to win, lose, or go on Broadway.
The match. How you get to that point, that's up to you two.
Yeah. Every move, everything, nothing was rehearsed. They never rehearsed anything. They went out and they had a match. And it was all fresh because they didn't know what they were going to do before they did it. They just went out there and did it. Now, everything is so scripted. They know the high points. They know what's going to happen, when, and where. It's down to an art, and to me, that's boring.
Yeah,
I would.
you get that a lot with WWF or WWE's main roster. NXT, you still get some of the old school style where these guys are out there just doing whatever. You can tell because, and it's so over the top when some of them are doing it, and you'll get that in things like AEW and New Japan as well, because New Japan and AEW are trying to do more of the old school thing too. Whereas you can tell the difference between the main roster and WWF, or I keep on saying WWF, WWE. Vince has his fingerprints on everything there. And they do things so scripted, especially the women's stuff. The women's stuff is so scripted. You know what's coming. If you watched one women's match, you've watched with the given female performer, you know exactly what she's going to do the next match, because it's going to be the exact same moves. They just change the order.
Yep. Well, before we went live tonight, me and you were talking, and you were telling me about this match coming up with Roman Reigns and one of the Usos. Mm-hmm. And what was my response to that? You already know who's walking out the winner.
We know who's going to win, but we don't know how they're going to get there.
And see, that's the part I miss. That's the part I miss. Not knowing who's going to win, because when you had Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair going out there, whether it be for a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, you don't know if they're going to go Broadway. You don't know if Ric's going to win or Dusty's going to win. Nobody knew but those two.
Yeah, and here's another problem: we don't have jobbers anymore.
Nope, we don't.
So even on the regular weekly programming, you get the big guys going against the big guys. So that takes away a lot of it too, because you knew that George South was going to lose every week.
Yep.
But you didn't know how. Now you got this guy who's saved the U.S. champ. He's in a tag team match, but he's going to lose to this guy because they're setting up a rivalry for them at the next pay-per-view. And so, but that, like you were saying, who's going to do it. And when you have a big name guy losing against a little guy, it's what's known as 50-50 booking. When you go to one of the wrestling sites or, one of the wrestling channels on YouTube, they call it 50-50 booking, because that's what it is. Half the time this guy's going to win, the other half this guy's going to win. In the case with Jey Uso, Jimmy's hurt. Jey Uso going against Roman Reigns, Jay's going to lose because he's not the big single star Roman Reigns is. Jay is the tag team guy with his brother. That's what they're known for. They're known for being a tag team.
Now, there have been exceptions to those rules, but for the most part, in general, that's the way that it's going to go down. It would surprise me very much if Jay even come close to making it look like he's going to win the match.
Yeah, they just had a match at the last pay-per-view, and Roman Reigns mopped the floor with the guy.
Yeah,
and now they're doing a quit match.
So, it's to the point now. I haven't watched a WWF program in probably 8 years. I'm just not into it. I can't do it. It's too cartoonish. It's too scripted. I want wrestling to get back to what it was in the 80s. I don't want to look at a match and be able to call who's going to win every match on the card before it even happens.
Yeah.
And I could do that 8 years ago.
We need to address real quick something that Midnight said. He said he thought Roman retired because his cancer came back. He had quit wrestling for a couple of months. They cut it quick enough to where he was able to undergo a couple of months of treatment, and then he was able to come back again. So that's what happened with him. And then he took a couple of months off because of the COVID thing, because he was worried about his health because he's more susceptible because of the cancer. But he's still wrestling. He never officially retired.
Mad Sexy, you take care, man. Have a good night. Thanks for stopping by. I hate that for Roman. I really do. I think he's got so much talent. And that's another thing. like I said, irks me about the WWE. I wish they'd just turn these guys loose. I wish they'd stop scripting it the way they script it. I wish they'd stop telling them what to say in their interviews. Just let them be themselves. Get out there and do it. Put on a show like they would put on 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You know, let us lose ourselves into the show. We can't do that anymore. Not with the product that the WWE's putting out.
Well, one of the things I think is going to help Reigns is they now have him with Paul Heyman too. Paul Heyman is now his manager.
Yeah. You know, and I could be completely off base here, but I see a guy like Roman Reigns end up going to AEW or NWA here in the near future. With or without Paul Heyman. And I see a lot of the guys from the WWE taking off. You know, I think there's too many hands in a cookie jar up in New York, and there's going to be people left out in the cold. They're going to get pissed off, and they're just going to leave. And where are they going to go? Well, now they have two choices where 4 years ago they only had maybe one, and that was TNA. And TNA wasn't even nearly the show that the WWE could put on.
Yeah, or they would go to one of the independents like Ring of Honor.
Yep.
Someplace like that.
And now they, like I said, they got options. The NWA's back and putting on pretty good shows. I have seen a few of those, and those are pretty good shows that they're doing. Ghost, how you doing, Bubba?
Yeah, the NWA is working with AEW. They've had a couple matches with they did one with the NWA Women's Champion challenging for the AEW Women's Championship, and then they had her on another show defending the NWA Women's Championship on an AEW show.
Yeah. Hey, I just had a heck of a thought, man. And we need to see if we can get this one together, Rich. A midgets match. Ghost Tactical versus Clover Tech in a steel cage.
No, make it a triple threat and throw Gary in there too.
No. Gary could be the referee. We have Gary as the referee, and it'll be Ghost Tactical versus Clover Tech in a ladder match, no less. Better yet, a cage ladder match.
Ghost said he'd wear his ass out.
And what are they fighting for? There has to be something. Has to be something special they have to climb the ladder for. What would be one thing that they would both love to have? Ecstasy? Nah.
No, that wouldn't work.
I would say a 1911, but ain't neither one of them got enough class for that. I'm thinking here.
A contract for Walther's shooting team.
Nah.
Ghost says a McMillan 3838 Lapua. Kingpin says elevator shoes.
Elevator shoes? Well, now that you mention it, I'll think of something. I'll come up with something. I don't know what, but I'm sure I can come up with something. But yeah, I think that would be a very interesting match. Ghost says he could win, but I'm gonna put my money on Clover. Clover looks wily.
Ghost is a Marine.
Well, this is true. Ghost has definitely got some experience on his side in one thing or another. But, Clover is a leprechaun. So he's got that whole magic thing going for him. So, yeah, I think I'm going to put my money on the Tactical Leprechaun.
Yeah, I got to agree with Kingpin. I would have to go with Ghost.
Well, now we can take bets. We can definitely take some bets.
Now, Ozzy says 1,000 rounds of 9mm. I don't know if he's betting 1,000 rounds of 9mm or if he's saying that's what they should be fighting over.
1,000 rounds of 9mm? No, we couldn't do that because 1,000 rounds of 9mm would weigh a whole lot hanging from a chain. We don't want somebody to die, and somebody probably would at that point.
Well, now you put a briefcase with a piece of paper in there saying that you own the ammo, or put a gift certificate for the ammo in the briefcase, and they get the briefcase, and then they got the gift certificate.
That we can do. That sounds like a winning. Or better yet, how about just a $2,000 gift card? How about a $2,000 gift card?
Well, I hope you're funding all this because I ain't got that.
Oh no! I'm a big time YouTube celebrity. Remember, I'm going to Patreon this stuff. That's how this is going to happen.
Uh-oh.
This is all going to be Patreon funded.
Ghost is making himself the heel. He said, "By the way, Marine fight dirty."
So that's fine. That's fine. Marine can fight dirty, but the Leprechaun's going to use the magic because he is the Leprechaun. So we're going to have to sign this one up, get it started, get the paperwork rolling. Somebody contact Clover. I want him in on this. And I know the perfect place to have the match. I just happen to know somebody that works at the golf course. We'll turn the golf course into the wrestling ring.
No, I thought you were going to say that Dallas Sportatorium was as close as those guys both are.
Well, yeah, that's true, but you know,
we can have an old school WCCW match going on here.
My question is who do you think's going to break a hit first, Ghost or Clover?
Clover.
You think?
Yeah.
One of them will dislocate a shoulder. The other one's going to break a hip. It's going to be bad for both. So.
Ghost says he's Irish and he's offended by him calling himself a leprechaun.
You know who started that, don't you, Ghost? You know. And by the way, somebody was talking to me the other day, Ghost, about the Glock video. And for anybody that may listen to this in the near future, it was Ghost Tactical that sent me said Glock. And I still have it. It's put up. But anyway, guys, we've been going a little over an hour here. And I think I'm going to call it quits for the night. You got anything to add to the show, Mr. Rich?
No, I think we covered a good bit. I mean, we even went off topic, but again, that's not unusual.
No, not for us. We always go off topic.
I think every one of our shows goes off topic. I don't think anybody ever stays completely on topic.
We are the Dusty Rhodes of wrestling chats.
Yeah,
we start off on the right path, and then somewhere along the line we swerve, and then we get back where we started from. So here we are. Anyway, guys, I thank everyone for showing up. God bless each and every one of you. Y'all take care. Ghost, I love you, Bubba. Y'all take care, guys. Bye.
Later.